This is the iPhone 17 Pro, and it might be the most polarizing Pro iPhone that Apple has made. While the 17 Pro advertises insanely great performance with new features and advancements in the camera system, the thing that Apple is most known for, their design, has come into question on this phone. Not just in terms of aesthetics, but functionally and with durability. After using it for the last couple of weeks, I think some of that is worth taking seriously, but a lot of it is blown out of proportion, and today, I'm diving into my entire experience with the 17 Pro. What's been impressive, both with testing and real-world use, what hasn't, and things that potentially improve the overall experience over past versions. So with that said, let's get into it. This video is sponsored by Anker. Hey everyone, Kyle Erickson here. Every year when new Pro iPhones come out, there always seems to be some controversy. Sometimes there are legitimate hardware issues like overheating or battery health. There's always a few things that are just bugs in software. And most of these eventually get fixed or patched, but there are always one or two things that stick around in the conversation, and this year will likely be no exception. From a design standpoint, the 17 Pro saw quite a controversial change this year with a much bolder, aggressive look. The titanium frame was replaced with an aluminum unibody, there's a smaller glass back panel, and the camera bump was swapped out with a much larger camera plateau that spans the entire width of the phone. Visually, while it's not quite as minimal as we're used to seeing on an iPhone, I actually really like the look of it. I think it's the first time in a while that Apple has really stepped out of the safe zone and offered something more unique looking. Not only in form, but with color selection as well. The Pro comes in only 3 colors: silver, deep blue, and cosmic orange, where orange is really the first bright color that we've seen in any Pro iPhone, and in my opinion it looks fantastic. It has a nice metallic sheen to it that looks more like copper to me than orange, especially around the edges that are rounder and softer this year. That does make the phone more comfortable to hold caseless, and I do find that the camera plateau is sometimes handy to rest my finger on, which alleviates some of the weight from my pinky finger where I normally would rest my phone. The plateau also reminds me a lot of the raised edges on the Apple Watch Ultra, and really the general design language for that matter. It does look like it's got a bit more bulk this year over the 16 Pro, and it is technically a tad heavier at 206 grams over 199 in the 16 Pro, but holding each in my hands, it's very hard to notice any perceivable difference in weight. There have also been reports of this easily scratching or showing wear, especially around the camera bump. I've been using this both in and out of a case now over the last couple of weeks, sliding it around and placing it on different surfaces, and I personally haven't seen any marks myself, but that could change over time. With that being said, the screen on here is supposed to be much more durable in the 17 Pro over past models. It's still a 6.3-inch ProMotion panel that visually doesn't look all that different from the 16 Pro, but there are a few big upgrades in here. The first, like I said, is that increased durability with a new ceramic Shield 2 glass that has been proven to be the strongest that's been put in an iPhone. That's supposed to be up to 3 times more scratch resistant this year, and honestly, this is at a point now where I don't know that I'm even going to worry about putting a screen protector on here. I removed the one on my 16 Pro a few months into owning it, and there are still no marks on it. Granted, I have been pretty careful with it, and I know that is likely going to be different for everyone, but putting a screen protector on here also negates the new anti-reflective coating, which I do find is noticeable in the right circumstances. Like I mentioned last week in my iPhone 17 review, I was hoping this was going to be on the level of the Samsung S25 Ultra coating, but it's not quite there. You can definitely notice it side by side with previous iPhone models, and when you combine that with a new 3000 nit peak outdoor brightness that's up from 2000 last year, things are a lot more viewable outside, but indoors and just with general usage, it still looks the same as the last couple of generations, which isn't a bad thing. The picture, as always, looks fantastic. You get deep inky blacks, smooth motion, and very accurate color representation. which makes this great for editing photos or doing any color critical work on here, but it's also great for watching content or while gaming. For the first time in a long time, I've been doing a ton of gaming on this phone. It's probably the most powerful phone out there right now, and it does have about the same performance as some older M-series Mac chips, which is quite impressive on its own, but everything looks great on here and runs super smooth. I am going to dive into performance in a minute, but I want to go over some of the issues that I've had with power and the battery before I go there, because I do want to address some of the possible misconceptions with this phone. Apple says that the 17 Pro has about 20 to 25% better battery life over the 16 Pro, and with regular usage, I definitely feel like I do get a bit more juice out of it, but it's also somewhat circumstantial. For instance, on a normal day where I don't do any gaming and I'm mostly looking at news, social media, maybe watching a couple of videos and talking to people, I finish the day with about 30 to 40% battery life, which I would say is definitely a little bit better than the 16 Pro, where that might be closer to 20%. On the weekends when I ramp up the usage with more resource-heavy tasks, like gaming, filming, and using apps like Sleeper on Sundays, which is essentially just a constant stream of network requests, the 17 Pro will eat through battery fairly quickly. It still lasts close to a full day, but on a couple of occasions I have found myself either charging the phone or using a power bank with it, so it's definitely not bulletproof by any means, but lucky enough, charging has improved on the 17 Pro as well. Wired charging in both the iPhone 17 and 17 Pro was increased from 30 to 40 watts this year, where Apple says that you can get a 0 to 50% charge in around 20 minutes, and I have found that to be fairly accurate, where I can generally go from 0 to 70% in roughly a half hour, which is pretty decent. On the wireless side of things, MagSafe still charges at 25 watts with relatively low heat buildup, so nothing you have to worry about there. And you now get up to 25 watts through Qi 2, which is a nice addition that gives you a bit more selection in terms of third-party options. Speaking of which, Anker sent me a couple of things from their Nano lineup, and if you're picking up an iPhone 17 or 17 Pro, these are a great way to take advantage of the faster charging Apple gave us this year. The Anker Nano 45-watt charger hits that 50% charge in 20 minutes with a nice compact design. It's smaller and lighter than Apple's new 40-watt adapter, gives you the fastest speed available, and is also cheaper than Apple's charger. If you're on the go, there's Anker's Nano Power Bank. I use this a lot myself while gaming, and again, this is a much better alternative than Apple's own MagSafe battery. It has a higher output wattage at 15 watts versus 12. It's slimmer and has more capacity at 5,000 milliamp hours, and it works with every model, where the Apple Pack only works with the iPhone Air. This again is much cheaper than the official MagSafe pack, and if you're interested in either of these, I will have links to them below, but back to the iPhone 17 Pro. Performance-wise, like I said, this thing is pretty incredible. The 17 Pro comes packed with the A19 Pro chip that has a 6-core CPU, 6-core GPU, and 12 gigs of RAM, where CPU benchmarks see about a 13 to 16% improvement over the A18 Pro, and between 28 to 40% increases in GPU benchmarks. But translating that into real-world use, the performance increase is not something that you generally notice. Using iOS 26 has been fine for me, where I have noticed some styling bugs in the software, but any iPhone from the past few years is going to feel largely the same for casual usage. Whether that be using social media, browsing the web, or watching content, and even more resource-heavy use cases, like photo and video editing, don't really see any meaningful gains. I have seen some people mention that the 12 gigs of RAM in here could potentially be better than the 8 in the 16 Pro or the 17 for things like AI, for when Apple AI gets sorted out, which I do believe will happen in the next year or so, but I think it's a little early to make assumptions there. We really don't know how much of that stuff is going to work on the device with local models versus on the cloud, and how any of that system is going to be set up or run, so I'd rather not speculate too much, but one thing that both the 17 17 and 17 Pro have is neural accelerators built into the GPU, which are basically dedicated hardware components specifically built for on-device AI. So if I had to guess, I would say that Apple is probably planning for all these models to work with advanced AI when it becomes available. Speaking of the GPU, that is one area you immediately notice a difference in performance outside of benchmarks, where games play insanely well on the 17 Pro. Even better than the iPhone 17, which in itself is outstanding. Any games in the Apple Arcade are obviously super smooth, but even when you get into more resource-heavy AAA console titles like Assassin's Creed Mirage, where the iPhone 17 will occasionally stutter, you don't see that at all on here. And it stays much cooler as well, maxing out at about 42 degrees Celsius under sustained load, which is the lowest temperature that I've seen out of any smartphone that I've tested this year. That is likely due to the new vapor chamber that's built into the 17 Pro, and I believe that was one of the big reasons as to why this phone switched entirely to aluminum. I noticed this quite a bit not only while gaming, but when I'm in the camera app filming for extended periods of time, where everything just feels a bit cooler than the 16 Pro, and the cameras themselves saw an upgrade as well. The 17 Pro still has basically the same main and ultra-wide cameras as last year, with the main lens being a 48 megapixel f1.8 lens and the ultra-wide being an f2.2 48 megapixel lens. Side by side with the 16 Pro photos, you really don't notice much difference at all with these. There may be a marginal improvement at times due to the processing on the A19 Pro chip, but regardless, both of these lenses take nice natural looking photos without feeling too overprocessed, and are still fantastic for a smartphone. The telephoto, on the other hand, is brand new this year with a 48 megapixel f2.8 aperture and 4x zoom, and I much prefer this over the 5x telephoto on the 16 Pro. I've mentioned this a couple of times on the channel, but I actually preferred when the telephoto was a 3x zoom on the Pro. I just found that I used that focal length a lot more, and this is a bit closer to that. And the nice thing is, you get a bigger sensor this year that has more depth and produces higher quality photos. Also, because this is 48 megapixels, you get that same optical zoom feature you get on the main lens, where you can double the zoom range by pushing it to 8x and taking a 12 megapixel photo. The quality here is a noticeable improvement from just zooming to 8x digitally on the 16 Pro, and overall, I've been really happy with the images here. Similarly, moving to the selfie camera, this is something that I don't normally talk about much because front-facing cameras usually aren't the greatest quality, but I've been super impressed with this one. That has the new 18 megapixel square sensor that's in all the new iPhone models, where you can take both portrait and landscape photos without changing the orientation of the phone, which is quite handy. And there's also a center stage feature built in that will use AI to auto-rotate the image depending on how many people are in frame. I mentioned this last week in my iPhone 17 review, but that does seem to work off and on, but it's easy enough to just click the button and frame the image yourself. And the photos coming off of that lens have improved quite a bit, where there's a lot less noise and softness, and I find it much more usable on the video side of things as well. The stabilization is much improved on here, and I think if you're someone who vlogs, this has gotten to a point where the iPhone 17 Pro is really all you need in a lot of cases. The image quality is great, and just like the 16 Pro, the microphone quality is outstanding. So right now I'm recording in the standard video mode, so no log or anything like that, but I just wanted to record a quick sample with the microphone audio from here. There is also this new dual capture feature that can record both front and rear cameras at the same time, which I don't personally find useful myself. It can feel a bit awkward, and you're limited to a standard picture profile in that mode, just like the iPhone 17. But in the regular Pro video modes, I don't think any other phone comes close to matching the iPhone 17 Pro. Apple did add more advanced Pro shooting modes in the Pro this year with Apple ProRes RAW and Apple Log 2 that are supposed to retain more information in the shadows of your image, and I've been blown away by the quality here. I will definitely be using this phone for these videos at times, as shooting in log allows me to color match the footage pretty close to my mirrorless camera. And there are some angles that I just can't get with my camera, where the 17 Pro is just a lot more versatile, with a nice wide zoom range, especially with that new telephoto lens. That captures a ton of detail without looking too grainy or soft. Even at 8x zoom, the stabilization across every lens is fantastic, and you really can't ask for more here. Just know that I wouldn't necessarily recommend buying the Pro just to use these advanced video modes, especially if you're not familiar with filming in log, or you're just using the phone casually for capturing day-to-day events. Filming in log will eat storage, and in most cases, you're going to have some kind of external storage to record to, so it's not the most convenient in the world, and the iPhone 17 still takes great video, and if you're okay with not having that telephoto lens, that is probably more than good enough for most folks. I almost always film to an external SSD, but I did end up shooting some internal log footage last weekend out at a wildlife park, and you can see the file sizes get pretty large, which historically have been a problem for me. The most ideal way to transfer these types of files to my Mac, at least for me, is with AirDrop, and I always found that with my previous Apple devices, when I'd select these huge video files to transfer over, the transfer would almost always hang and eventually fail, where I'd have to resort to external tools like Blip to effectively transfer these files over wirelessly. With the iPhone 17 and 17 Pro, I haven't had that experience at all, where AirDrop has been much more reliable, and literally every transfer I've tried so far has gone through. And connectivity as a whole has been outstanding, which is likely due to Apple's new N1 chipset in the 17 series that handles Wi-Fi 7, Bluetooth 6, and Thread support. With Wi-Fi 7, I've got fantastic speeds with no drops and decent range. Bluetooth has been great, where the only time I had an issue was where I accidentally turned off Bluetooth for a while, and then when I turned it back on, I had a bit of trouble getting my AirPods to pop up, and I had to tinker around with that a bit. But again, the range there has been great, and I've got zero complaints there so far. Now, I have read that some folks have experienced occasional drops with 5G or CarPlay issues, but I can't say that I've ever run into any of those issues myself at all, and I think when it comes down to it, this is a really amazing phone in the right circumstances. If you're shooting raw photos or ProRes video, pushing the GPU with demanding games, or anything super resource intensive, it does make a lot of sense to get this, but if you're not doing those things, or you're coming from a 16 Pro, this probably isn't something you need to pick up unless you really like the look or something feature specific about the 17 Pro. For 95% of people, I would say that the regular iPhone 17 will do everything you need, but for the 5% who want those advanced features, I think you'll be pretty happy with the 17 Pro. In fact, if you did pick up a 17 Pro, I would love to know how you're liking it so far and what you're using it for, so feel free to drop a comment down below and let me know. But that's all I've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video or you found it useful. If you did, feel free to hit that like button. If you'd like to see more tech-related content or help me utilize the A19 Pro chip to simulate black hole physics while calculating the optimal time to microwave popcorn, please subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next upload.